Welcome to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kibler, your net profit CFO, helping business owners like you grow their net profit one episode at a time. And now your host, Ryan Kibler.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Net Profit Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Kibler, the Net Profit CFO. Today, I've got a good friend with me, Mark Dolfini from Lafayette, Indiana area, right?
That's correct. That's right.
And Mark is business owner, author, and we are going to have a great conversation today. And I really like the work that Mark does right now. The business that he owns and is working in predominantly is the Strategic Boardroom. We might talk about that a little bit. Author of The Time Wealthy Advantage. Mark, thank you for taking the time and coming on the show.
It's, you know what, for someone who wrote a book called The Time Wealthy Advantage, I appreciate you acknowledging the time. Thanks so much.
Sure.
It's truly a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give you an opportunity, give my audience a little more background on you and just a little bit of your journey, kind of how you got to where you are today, and just so they can get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, it's always one of those things, where do you start, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in upstate New York, and I was pretty much one of those kids it was kind of a serendipitous growing up, because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, and weren't a lot of kids around. I mean, not a lot of kids my own age, and the ones that were around, I just didn't really like them. Like, they just weren't very nice people, to me. But again, we were all just young and kids and just doing the things we did. So I often spent a lot of time by myself wandering the woods in upstate New York in the Catskills. And if you know anything about that area, that's not, it's not an area where a 7, 8, or 9-year-old should be wandering too much by himself. But it was a wonderful growing up. And as a result, I would wander off in the morning and find a place. I always found a place to drink, water to drink, and blueberries to eat, or black caps or something like that. Like, the mountain always fed us, right? And we'd come back home with our fingers in our mouths and our teeth stained purple. And my mom would are you hungry? You hungry for dinner? I'm like, no, I'm okay. Did you eat any of those berries? No. And our teeth are purple, Wonderful growing up, though. But it was great. It was great in a lot of ways for me, and very serendipitous, just because of my personality and my personality style. But as I got into school, and I was a decent student, but then you get distracted by all the worldly pleasures. And by the time I got to high school, I was pretty much just doing the absolute bare minimum. And I was smart enough to figure out, how could I graduate and only pass just the classes that I needed. And as a result, it put my cumulative average actually failing. So I actually technically failed my senior year, but passed and graduated because I figured out how to pass just the classes I needed. So I was dead last in my class, if not dead last, pretty darn close. So I tell people I was in the top 98% of my class. It usually takes them a minute to figure that out. But I share that story because there are many people out there that feel that sometimes if they don't have the best education, or they're not the smartest in the room, or they don't have the best grades, that holds them back in business, it holds them back in life. And that absolutely was not true for me at all. And many entrepreneurs that I know are incredibly smart, they're incredibly creative, and they have a level of ingenuity that most others just can't figure out. So there's smart in smart ways, and there's smart in book ways. And I always tell that story just to be more of an encouragement to people who may be thinking that, well, he went on to have an accounting degree at Purdue, and which I did. And, now I'm in a PhD program, which I am. And, but all of those things up to that had nothing to do with my success now. I mean, I can't say nothing, but the accounting degree was a good background. But I always say that just to encourage people.
Yeah, love that. I think I always heard the C students end up managing the A and B students, or something like that.
End up working for the A students end up working for the C students.
Yeah. I think that's what it was. So that's definitely interesting. Yeah, love that. Well, let's talk a little bit. I know you're in the middle of writing another book. We talked about that off air before we got started.
Yeah.
Most recent book, The Time Wealthy Advantage. I mean, as a business owner, time, right? Always, always, always such a battle, right? Where do I spend my time? How do I have a lot of time? let's dive in and let's talk about the book a little bit and maybe
Sure.
how some business owners can get some time back.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing that up because I'm not a time management expert. That's not at all what I do. And that distinction, and I understand why that, why that water gets muddied sometimes because when you write something called The Time Wealthy Anything, my first book was The Time Wealthy Investor, which was directed towards some of the most time-weary people on the planet, which are people who are property managers who are managing their own rental properties, right? Or property managers who are managing it for other people. And the time wealthy investor was directed towards them to help them out and help them put infrastructure and process in place that gives them back their time. And it was all based around this methodology called the VIP framework, Vision, Infrastructure, Process. And the whole concept of that was very strategic, very top down, where you start with the end in mind, right? That's Stephen Covey, where you're looking at the vision first and foremost is your personal vision. Where do you want to go? And then you reverse engineer this business, which is your business vision, which is, okay, cool, this is how we're going to get there. So really the business becomes the mechanism to deliver this personal vision for you, right? So when I wrote The Time Wealthy Investor, I wrote that specifically and strictly for a real estate audience and very, very specific real estate audience, right? People who had buy and hold properties. And then I decided, well, I really want to move out of that realm. There was just a lot of personal reasons I kind of wanted to move out just from working with real estate investors to really small business owner operators, solopreneurs or those who I refer to as micro businesses who have less than 20 employees because they're not written about. Like when we're talking about small business, the government, the SBA, the broad definition, they look at, a business under 500 employees. Are you kidding me? Right? When you look,
It's a big gap from 20 to 500.
that's a gigantic gap. And when you start looking at that, the interesting thing that is that people will often forget that when you're looking at it, so the SBA, my numbers might be a little bit off, but when you're looking at from that perspective of there's 36 million small businesses in the United States, which account for 99.9% of all the businesses that are out there, right? 99.9% of all the businesses in the United States. And I think I don't remember the exact number of the ones that are larger, but it's almost absurd the type of, the amount of businesses that are between, the solopreneur and the 1 to 19. And I think that number is right around 32 million. I think, yeah, that's the number. It wasn't 36 million, it's 32 million. So it's like, so literally you've got this massive amount of business being done by solopreneurs, which is like 28 million. And then the remaining 5 million, give or take, whatever it was, are, the 1 to 19. So no one's helping these folks the way that they need to be helped because everyone's writing these books, not to tear down the book Traction, but that book was it was written for a larger business. And I see smaller businesses trying to implement Traction. And I'm like, man, I just don't know that's the best fit. And I read it and I was like, okay, that's great if I had like 50 employees, but it was too much, right? So I started looking at different things and creating my own methodology around the VIP method, and that's how the VIPER method evolved, which is now what I wrote about in the Time Wealthy Advantage. And the VIPER methodology, again, it still follows that same vision, infrastructure, process framework, but you also have to include E, which is execution, and R, which is reporting. So when you have the E, the execution component to it, and the R, which is the reporting component to it, now small business owners who don't execute well, now you've got a framework in terms of making sure that you can execute well, because most plans don't execute, most plans fall apart in execution. And then you look at the R component, which is the making sure like you're measuring what actually is happening between lead metrics and lag metrics. So that journey of writing the Time Wealthy Advantage, starting out, it started out with, in the real estate realm, but it evolved into something much bigger into the small business community.
Yeah, love that. And I love the methodology too. And I think the work that you do today in the strategic boardroom, really helping business owners plan and have a plan, and then also helping them with execution.
Mm-hmm.
So it all really fits in. And I think if you're not doing those things, right, if you're not building an infrastructure, you don't have processes, and you don't have some members on your team that you've hired that are going to execute for you, you're going to be time poor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just how it goes. You're going to end up wearing every hat and doing everything yourself.
Yeah, that time weariness, right? That we mentioned, but we talked about initially. That time weariness is a problem. And this is why I think it's such a problem is that, like I said, I mean, the business owners that I work with, they're really smart and they have a really good work ethic. The problem is they're really smart and they have a really good work ethic. Because they're so smart, they think that every problem that comes to them is a problem for them to solve, and they often can, right? So they'll shift from, doing a lead gen thing to fixing their website to going and dealing with an accounts receivable issue and then going and dealing with a fulfillment issue and then going back and dealing with some salesperson issue and then, going back to the website and just flip-flopping all day long. And by the end of the day, you're just so worn out from this stop, start, stop process, which is very rough on our brains, as our brains are not meant to do that. So when you recognize that the problems that come up are not always yours to solve, and because people often have they have a very good work ethic, they'll work 18, 19, 20 hours a day to work those problems. As a result, every business owner will have just the same Wednesday over and over and over again. So it becomes this endless series of Wednesdays that, I remember one of my workers one time came in and said, "Happy Friday." And I was like, that has meant nothing to me for so long, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's so happy about Friday? Well, they're happy. They get paid and they get 2 days off. It meant nothing to me as the business owner at that point in time. So I was like, man, this has got to change. So that's the interesting thing, that just because you can do something doesn't mean it's yours to solve. And this is kind of the line in the sand where I drew for this, is that when you start thinking about what you would pay someone to do that task, right? So let's say that that task is a $20 an hour job. If you could pay someone else to do that job and it would take $20 an hour to replace that, keep in mind that's what you're paying yourself to do that job. So for these business owners who have these ideas of, making $1 million or $10 million or, $100 million business, the math doesn't work. There's not enough time in the day to make $20 an hour and do all that working. And again, you can only do one thing at a time, because even multitasking, you're not as effective. So that's the interesting thing, that when you start doing that math in your head, you go, oh, okay, yeah, I could get someone, I'm making enough revenue now where I could get someone to do that $20 an hour work. And now I'm doing the $300 an hour work and maximizing that. And that's probably the easiest formula to scale.
Yeah. And I think all of this, you know, the business owners that I've worked with and been around, and, if you talk to them about, well, what's your vision? Right.
Mm.
I have yet to run into a business owner that I remember that when they talk about their vision, they talk about, well, this is what I want to do on a day-to-day basis. Right. Usually it's much bigger than that. And it's like, well, this is what I want my business to look like, or this is what I want in sales, right? Or this is the team that I want. But I think even in the vision part, you should get down to, what does your day look like? What are you spending your time on? And why, right? Why are you the person doing that?
Yeah. And I think that's really smart. And I would probably just go just a little bit further down the path
Yeah.
and say, what do you want your life to look like first and foremost? Because what you just described to me sounds like a business vision. And in our line of work, when people come to me and say, "Oh, I need a business guy," right? And I'm a strategist, and they think I do business coaching and consulting, which I do, but at the end of the day, I'm a strategist. I take all the tools and, kind of lay it out for you. You do a really good job on the financial side of things and don't delve into that personal side, which makes you effective. Like, you have to you have to have that barrier, right? With me, and I have a degree in accounting as well, but I know enough about accounting to go, oh, you need a guy like Ryan, because I'm not going to get in. I can look at the balance sheet and the income statement and say, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense to me. But realistically, you need someone else who's more of a specialist in those areas, because, again, a strategist like me just can't be good in all those areas. But that said, I am going to ask the question to say, well, what if you did wake up tomorrow with $30 million in your bank account? What would your day-to-day life look like? And usually it's like, well, I don't know. Like, they started this business with this idea of what they wanted their life to look like, but because it was always focused on money and it was always focused on achievement, they confused achievement for fulfillment. And all of a sudden they're like, they're making, in many times they're very successfully they're very successful financially, but their lives are a train wreck, or their home lives are a train wreck, or they have no relationship with their families because that's become the surrogate for their personal vision. And when you create a business vision without ever creating a personal vision, your business vision in essence becomes your personal vision, right? When you create a business vision before you create a personal vision, you end up creating a life. When you end up creating a business vision before a personal vision, you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. Then that just sucks. I mean, ask me how I know. So,
For sure.
right. So I think just to take what that business component, like the business vision, I think you're right, is to say, well, what do you want your day-to-day life to look like from a business perspective? Like, what are some of the best things that you could do and be spending your time on? But even going a little bit further to say, well, what do you want your life to look like? I love what I do. I get to get up every morning and I can't wait to start my day because I get to do the same things, having great conversations with people. My phone isn't ringing off the hook. I don't have all these people upset at me. I own several businesses in the property management world and in the real estate world, but I'm not getting blown up like I used to because I have systems and processes and people that run those things now. If you and I were having lunch 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible. My phone would have been ringing off the hook and we couldn't even have a conversation.
Yep, for sure. And the other thing I'll take maybe a step further too is, it's not just we're coming near the end of the year here, 2025. People are probably starting to think about what does 2026 look like?
Right.
I think it's not just 1 year. It's also 3 years, 5 years. Because I do think, especially if you're that business owner that, you're trying to get to the next level or the next stage and you're really trying to get something off the ground, maybe your personal vision isn't achieved yet. So there are some times that you got to just hit the gas and just
Yeah.
get after it. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think it is, I love that you brought the personal vision into it because I think that's really important. And it's also okay to look out the next 5 years, I think, too.
Yeah, well, and I think because one, it's got a symbiotic relationship. They both have symbiotic relationship with one another. But I will tell you that, things weren't great at my house for a while. And when things aren't good at home, things aren't great anywhere.
For sure.
And I just I was hiding in work and I didn't want to deal with the things that were going on at home. And fortunately, me and my bride found a way to make our marriage work the way it needed to work. We put God at the center of our relationship and made that decision. Man, I'll tell you, it was an awful, awful period of time for us. And I was making decent money, but I just didn't want to be around because I didn't want to deal with what was going on at home. And so I'm just saying, like, that personal vision, it's going to come around one way or the other. And, I often say to people, what would you say? Let's pretend you're turning 100 years old and you're having your 100th birthday speech. What would you talk about? What would you want? What would be the message that you would want people to carry outside the room after you were done speaking? And, who would you even want in the room? And what would you even want the message to be carried outside the room after you were done? So when you start thinking about it in terms of that, in terms of legacy, now it starts to become a much deeper conversation within yourself. And most people, when they really start to think about this conversation, it's extremely uncomfortable for them. And they're like, man, this is not easy. I'm like, no, it's not easy. And, take some time. I mean, I spend a lot of time meditating about it, writing about it, praying about it. And over time, it's become very, very honed, but it has not been easy. But I'll tell you, it's absolutely worth it. And people, they see the lifestyle that I live and they're like, man, how do you get a life like that? I'm like, I'll tell you what, it's by design and it's just not by wandering around. So I really encourage people to take that time around, how does their business serving their personal vision and not that you're running always at 105%, but where you're running at 90% and you now have bandwidth because the opposite of, what I won't say the opposite, but what destroys love isn't hate. What destroys love is hurry. And when you're always rushing around and not spending that time spending that time in relationships, then it's just more and more of an inoculation that things aren't going to work out the way that you're hoping they will.
Love that. Yeah. I would highly, highly encourage all of my audience rewind in the last 5 minutes and listen, take all that in again. Because, yeah, I mean, what do things look like when you're done? Definitely, that's something that I haven't even spent a ton of time thinking about.
Mm.
And as I was just sitting here, I mean, I think having your business life together and your personal life like together, that it's actually working and working well and, things are going well. That might be one of the biggest challenges that I think business owners face in their
Yeah.
life, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we all go through things, we all face tough challenges and tough times, but to consistently have that be going right, I think that's a huge, huge challenge.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and it's even more difficult when you have family involved in the business. And now that you got family involved in the business or husband and wife teams, and they don't have a moment's rest, and, you know, every date night turns into a board meeting, customer calls and this thing's got to be addressed. And, what am I supposed to do? And the next thing you know, a laptop gets pulled out or someone's logging into something else. And that's what just, I mean, for me, it's kind of a mission because I just feel like there's so many marriages that are under attack just in general. And then you add in this layer and they can't even fire themselves because they put themselves inextricably inside this business that they could never remove themselves from. So, yeah, I really, and for those listeners maybe who are also married, what is your vision for your marriage? What's your vision for your relationship with your children? What's your vision for your relationship with your faith? Like that could be fragmented and pieced out to all the things that are important to you. Because everybody just focuses so heavily the financial piece, which again, I'm not suggesting that the financial piece isn't relevant. It's very relevant. I mean, my degree's in accounting and finance, for God's sake. I mean, I get it. You don't have to convince me. But because I was focusing so much on that one side, it left me very vulnerable to other aspects of my life that I was completely missing.
For sure. For sure. And I just want to say for my audience, and this is kind of where I want to go to next. I mean, if you like what you're hearing here, right? I mean, Mark, this is really what you do inside of the Strategic Boardroom program, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think my audience is getting a little taste of it, but I want to give you the opportunity really to talk about the program a little bit, kind of what it looks like, to be a part of that program, work with
Yeah.
you, so that if my audience feels like, hey, this is an area in my life that I really need to do better and need some help with, then they can reach out to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So it's not a one size fits all approach because I've had to put a lot of different tools in my toolbox. And, people will often just kind of default to say, oh, yeah, here's my coach, for lack of a better term. And then I will say that I do coach. I use a methodology of coaching, which for me is asking questions and also holding people accountable. Right. So I think if you currently have a coach, and it doesn't necessarily need to be me, but if you currently have someone that is not holding you accountable or you never hear from them, like unless you call them, that's not okay. Like to me, a coach, and I don't know, I mean, you were in sports. If
Yep.
you didn't show up, you're getting a call. And not only are you getting a call, it's the next day when you do show up, it's, hey, Ryan, just run some laps until I get tired. You're like, okay, right? You're just going to be burning holes in the earth until, right? That's what a coach does. Jerks a knot in your tail when you need it, kicks you in the pants when you need it, puts an arm around your shoulder when you need it. That's a coach. And I just see so many folks that are just like, don't want to talk to people because they're just so afraid of like I don't get it. I'm like, then why are you in this business? Why are you doing this? And I know why, because it can be lucrative for sure. But that side of things, I just want to make sure that people do understand that side of coaching for me, like I give people unfettered access to my calendar. They can book as many calls as they want. All I ask is just don't book more than one call at a time. That's it. You can book them back to back to back for all I care. As long as I've got access on my calendar or scheduling on my room on my calendar, you can have as many sessions as you want. And I have so many people like, man, that's unheard of. Yeah, but I'll tell you what, after 3 or 4 back-to-back calls, they're gonna have plenty to work on. And if they get on a fifth call and they don't have that stuff done, I'm gonna be going, why are we talking? Right? Not that I don't want to talk to you. I can be friendly, but why are we here? Right? And they settle into a rhythm and a routine here pretty quickly. But that's the one thing that I'll do. And the other side that's really important is that it's not just about the coaching. I also will have a mastermind component to it as well. So they get outside perspectives from other people in completely different industries that may give them ideas. And that's something that I see. If you've never read Sam Walton's book, Made in America, one of the interesting things about him was he was always experimenting and innovating. And he was using stuff from similar industries, right? But he was always even looking outside of the industry to see what he could take and innovate and put in his stores with that singular focus about just being the best at what he could be. And that's where I feel like the masterminds could also bring in value for sure. But one final component to this, though, is that it also, I really recommend that if they are in a relationship with someone, that that person is also involved in the sessions. And the reason for that is because what we're working on here is a level of emotional intelligence that will be growing, and it will be altering, and it will be changing. And because that level of emotional intelligence expands, you don't want to leave that other person behind. And I have seen that happen too many times where I'm encouraging them to say, hey, where's your husband? Where's your spouse? Like, where's your significant other? Oh, they couldn't make it. Okay, which is fine. But trust and know, like, we're going to be having conversations around, hey, well, how are things at home? And then there's that real weird, awkward silence. I'm like, okay, so not great. And I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not a therapist, but I do have tools in my toolbox that I can offer them and say, hey, maybe this is a thing, or maybe you guys need to go for some real counseling and work through that stuff because you've got stuff that you need to work through, and it's going to manifest itself in a horrible way as this business continues to get more and more successful. So I really feel like that's something that people have to understand, that if you are going to get into an arrangement like that with a coach that's going to be working on your vision and your core beliefs and your core values, that you will evolve as a human being. And I really would hate to see someone being left behind just because they're not privy to those meetings.
For sure. Yeah. I think that is really important. Really good advice. Mark, I definitely recommend, my audience. Again, I think this episode has been really good. I would recommend they rewind the last part too, right? There's a couple pieces in there they need to rewind and really listen to a couple times. And I want to wrap up here. What is the best way for my audience to get in touch with you, get a hold of you, work with you? Where is the best place for them to go?
Sure. I'm on social media. Facebook's pretty easy. I have my website, which is strategicboardroom.com. And for those of you who may want a copy of the book, and I know they're probably already looking at it on Amazon because they're multitaskers, right? They can't help themselves. But if you'd actually like a signed copy of it, and I'll even throw in a coaching session. It's not a sales session. It's a 30-minute coaching session. I'll throw that in for the book. And I'll sign it for domestic U.S. I'm not sure if you have any international listeners. I suspect you may have some. But for domestic U.S., I'll sign it. I'll send it to you guys, and we'll do a 30-minute coaching session. And you can go to strategicboardroom.com/net profit.
Love it. Thank you so much for doing that. I know that link specifically is for our audience. So Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Greatly, greatly appreciate your offer to my audience. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time and coming on the show today, Mark.
You have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. And until next time, everybody, go accelerate your profits. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Net Profit Podcast with Ryan Kimler. Make sure to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to check the show notes for our guest contact information and to connect with Ryan on his website, netprofitcfo.com.